The proper fluid must be used to fill your transmission if you want it to run smoothly and last as long as possible. You may experience issues with an overfilled transmission in addition to the numerous issues that can result from insufficient transmission fluid. The effects of adding too much transmission fluid to your car are covered in this video. We also look at the symptoms it will produce and demonstrate how to resolve the issue. It's the Car Problems YouTube channel. Subscribe and let's get started. What happens if you overfill transmission fluid? The performance of your transmission could suffer if it is overfilled. However, there usually isn't a need for action if you overfill it with half quarts or less. You should think about draining your transmission if you overfill it by 1 quart or more. It might not be a good idea to drive around with too much transmission fluid if you have a newer vehicle with a DSG or CVT transmission. Draining some transmission fluid is frequently quite simple, and if you have an expensive car, it is definitely worthwhile. Let's look at the most common consequences in more detail. Pressure buildup. Adding more fluid to a transmission than it requires raises internal pressure. This pressure can also introduce contaminated air into the system in addition to causing fluid to leak out and overheating. When liquid is splashed around by internal rotating gears, a chemical reaction results in the formation of air bubbles and foam. The fluid's capacity to lubricate the internal components is reduced as a result of this circumstance. Overheating. The transmission is kept cool by the transmission fluid. It may become overheated if you use too much of it, which initially seems counterintuitive. However, there will be some leakage from the buildup if the transmission is overfilled. If it escapes from the gearbox, seals will break, reducing lubrication and raising the gearbox's temperature. Excessive transmission wear. To function properly, the transmission's moving parts need the proper amount of lubricity. When the transmission is overfilled, the lubrication level isn't uniform, which causes much faster wear. As the transmission continues to be subjected to high pressure, shifting and functional problems will start to appear. It might even result in the next difficulty, total failure. Transmission failure. It's unlikely that an excessive amount of fluid will cause your transmission to malfunction overnight. However, ignoring the problem will only lead to further problems. Failure will eventually result from a confluence of factors. The transmission suffers from a variety of issues, including leaking seals, unlubricated metal parts, and pressure buildup. It might eventually stop working. Now let's take a closer look at the symptoms of overfilled transmission fluid. Trouble changing gears. There may be too much fluid in the system if shifting gears seems to be a problem. Foam and air can form under increased pressure, which can have an impact on how well the internal parts are lubricated. Other problems arise from this mixture, such as difficult shifting without adequate lubrication. You might also observe abrupt shifts and gear slippage. Leaking fluid. Sometimes the transmission fluid puddle under the car is the first indication that there is a problem. Transmission fluid is typically red, making it easy to identify. Leakage frequently happens as a result of the seal breaking under too much pressure and buildup. Leaking results from the fluid trying to escape the system. Higher fluid level on dipstick. If you suspect that you overfilled the transmission with fluid, you can quickly identify the issue by looking at the dipstick. The dipstick can be used to check the levels, but it's not always a trustworthy indicator. The transmission fluid thins out as the engine runs and gets warm. The texture will be much thicker if the car has been sitting. It's best to warm up the engine before checking your transmission fluid with the dipstick. Strange noises. Your transmission shouldn't generally make any odd noises. Humming, grinding, or whining sounds could indicate a problem if you start to hear them. It can be challenging to pinpoint the source of the noise because the transmission is so close to the engine. However, you might also experience other symptoms along with this. The whining or humming typically occurs during grinding when the fluid level is off, signaling that there is not enough lubrication and the gears are rubbing against one another. How to resolve? You need to drain some transmission fluid if there is too much of it. Bringing the levels down is not always an easy fix. Although siphoning the fluid out with a tube is an option, it can be challenging if you don't know what you're doing. If not, you must drain it through the transmission's drain port. Make sure to collect the fluid in a changing pan and properly dispose of it. After draining some fluid, the system should then be checked again to make sure it is now operating at the proper level. Hope the information was useful for you. If so, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel.